Japan is a nation in the Pacific Ocean, just off the coast of East Asia. The Japanese archipelago consists of 6,852 islands. However, the four main islands comprise 98% of the land area and 99% of the population. East of Japan is the main expanse of the Pacific Ocean, which provides a strategic hinterland that isolates and defends the islands from that direction. Japan's nearest neighbors lie across smaller bodies of water: Russia to the north, across the Sea of Okhotsk; North and South Korea to the west, across the Sea of Japan; and China and Taiwan to the southwest, across the East China Sea. The western and southwestern approaches are the traditional avenues of invasion to and from Japan over the centuries. The country is a constitutional monarchy, with the Emperor Akihito reigning since 1989 as the 125th successor to the chrysanthemum throne. The functions of the emperor as head of state are largely ceremonial and strictly constrained by the Japanese constitution. Power is invested in a bicameral legislature, the National Diet, from which the prime minister is selected. The current head of government is Shinzo Abe, of the center-right Liberal Democratic Party. Japan has the 10th largest population in the world, with 127.6 million people, but the long average life expectancy and low birth rate of the Japanese means the population has been falling since a 2006 peak of just over 128 million. The population is forecast to fall to 95 million people by 2050, the largest nonviolent population contraction in recorded history. There is no agreement on how to address this loss of population. Half-hearted measures to encourage marriage and more children per family have been notably unsuccessful, while immigration remains highly controversial. Japan nevertheless boasts the third largest economy in the world, equivalent to $4.2 trillion, and a highly advanced manufacturing sector. Exports equal 17% of GDP, while imports are 18%, a quarter of which are energy imports like oil, natural gas, and coal. Japan's principal markets are China, the United States, South Korea, Hong Kong, and Thailand. Japan's principal import partners are China, the United States, Australia, Saudi Arabia, South Korea, UAE, and Qatar. This dependency on energy imports has been exacerbated by the Fukushima nuclear disaster, the subsequent shutdown of all Japanese reactors, and the slow pace of their reactivation. Because Japan lies on the volcanic zone of the Pacific Ring of Fire, the islands consist of mountainous terrain unsuitable to large-scale agriculture over much of the land surface. The country also lacks many prime materials necessary for modern industry, including iron ore, alumina, bauxite, copper, and traditional fossil fuel energy sources. Like Britain, another island nation, control of the sea lanes for Japan is not an option. The lesson was demonstrated conclusively by the United States Navy in the later stages of the Second World War. Four principal home islands of the Japanese are Honshu, Kyushu, Shikoku, and Hokkaido. Japan has sovereignty over the islands of Nakadori and Fukui off the west coast of Kyushu, the Ogasawara Islands, including Ogasawara and Iwo-jima, and the Ryukyu Islands, including Tanegashima, Yakushima, Amami, Okunoshima, Okinawa, Miyako, Ishigaki, and Yonaguni. These are the larger inhabited islands. There are many uninhabited rocks scattered throughout these archipelagos. Japan is engaged in a number of disputes with her neighbors over control of other islands in the surrounding seas. Tsushima, or Dokdo Island, is controlled by Japan but claimed by both Koreas. Iturup, Shikotan, Habomai, and Kunashir Islands are controlled by Russia but claimed by Japan. The Senkaku Islands, or Diaoyu Islands, are controlled by Japan but claimed by China and Taiwan. Only the Senkaku Diaoyu Islands dispute with China can be considered dangerous at this time, but the friction arising from these disputes and from Japan's imperial history prior to the end of the Second World War has created an unfavorable threat environment. Only South Korea can be considered friendly, and that mostly due to the fact that both South Korea and Japan are U.S. allies. Relations with Russia have improved significantly since the end of the Cold War, but the tensions over the continuing standoff in Ukraine means that Japan cannot ignore the possibility of conflict between Russia and the United States, Japan's principal ally. Vladivostok is Russia's main Pacific port and home of the Pacific Fleet. The surface fleet is no longer the potent striking force it once was, consisting of a Slava-class guided missile cruiser as flagship, a Sovremeny-class guided missile destroyer, and 4 Udaloy-class anti-submarine warfare destroyers. Of greater concern are the submarine forces: 5 ballistic missile submarines, 5 cruise missile submarines, 4 nuclear attack submarines, and 8 diesel submarines. To the west, the totalitarian state of North Korea lacks a potent naval threat, but the development of Taepodong 1, 2, and 3 missiles has given Pyongyang the capability to reach any part of Japan with a conventional, chemical, or nuclear warhead. The North Koreans have demonstrated this in characteristic fashion by launching their ballistic missile tests over Japan and having them splash down in the Pacific Ocean on the far side of the islands. The greatest challenge for Japan, the one military planners are most concerned with, is the growing power of and deteriorating relations with China. The People's Liberation Army Navy, or PLAN, has made very large and sustained investments and is today the largest fleet in the world. But beyond mere numbers, the PLAN has invested heavily in expanding their capabilities with the aim of moving from a brown water fleet confined to their coasts to a blue water fleet capable of projecting power and securing China's own maritime supply lines. The PLAN is divided into 3 commands: the North Sea Fleet, the East Sea Fleet, and the South Sea Fleet. The South Sea Fleet is the largest of the 3, but not directly focused on Japan. The North Sea Fleet is headquartered in Qingdao and consists of 6 destroyers and 8 frigates, divided between anti-air, anti-surface, and anti-submarine roles, as well as 4 corvettes and 5 medium amphibious warfare ships, or LSTs. The North Sea Fleet also has subsurface forces consisting of China's lone Jia-class ballistic missile submarine, 4 nuclear attack submarines, and between 15 and 20 diesel subs. Of greater concern for the Japanese military is the powerful East Sea Fleet. With headquarters in Ningbo and major bases at Shanghai, Jiangshan, Zhoushan, and Fujian, the East Sea Fleet commands the bulk of China's amphibious capabilities. 11 medium landing ships defended by 8 guided missile destroyers, 17 frigates, and 4 corvettes. This fleet also has 7 diesel subs. The fleet's mission is very pointedly to be prepared for an invasion of Taiwan, should the needs ever arise. But that same amphibious capability could be turned against the southern Ryukyu Islands, which are geographically closer to China than to Japan. The PLA Navy also has 2 brigades of naval infantry deployed with the South Sea Fleet, but these could easily be moved northward and would form the core of any invasion force of Taiwan or the Ryukyus. They are backed by the air regiments of the PLA Air Force. The Nanjing Military District, opposite Taiwan, has 9 air superiority fighter regiments, 3 attack aircraft regiments, and 3 bomber regiments. Each regiment consists of between 40 and 50 aircraft. Additional regiments could also be drawn from neighboring military districts in the event of a conflict: the Jinan District, the Beijing District, and the Shenyang District. For the defense of her territory, Japan relies on the Self-Defense Forces, or JSDF. The Constitution renounces war as a policy option for the nation and prohibits the military from operating certain categories of offensive weapons, like strategic bombers and aircraft carriers. Nevertheless, the JSDF is a highly professional, well-trained, and well-equipped force in the finest traditions of excellence of Japan's armed forces. The Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force in particular still traces its lineage to the Imperial Japanese Navy, something the Japanese ground forces and air force do not do, and considers itself the heirs of Admirals Togo Heihachiro and Isoroku Yamamoto. The Japanese Navy is divided into 4 commands, with headquarters at Yokohama: Sasebo, Maizuru, and Kure. Each command is built around a surface escort flotilla consisting of a helicopter destroyer, 2 air defense frigates, and 5 anti-submarine or surface warfare frigates. The Navy also has 5 submarine flotillas with 3 diesel attack boats each of the excellent Soryu and Oyashio class. 3 submarine flotillas are stationed at Kure and 2 at Yokohama. The Japanese Navy also has aviation assets which consist of Lockheed P-3 Orion anti-submarine warfare patrol aircraft and Mitsubishi SH-60 helicopters, also used as sub-hunters. That leaves the Japanese Air Force with responsibility for maritime air defense at strike, roles for which JSDF pilots regularly train. The Southwestern Composite Air Division is stationed at Okinawa and consists of the 83rd Air Wing with F-15J fighters, as well as the 5th Air Defense Missile Group with Patriot PAC-2 missile batteries. The Western Air Defense Force is based in Kyushu and consists of the 8th Air Wing with F-15Js of 304 Squadron and F-2ABs of 6 Squadron at Tsuiki Air Base, and the 5th Air Wing with 301 Squadron flying F-4EJs out of Mutabaru Air Base. Central Honshu is defended by the 6th Air Wing with F-15Js in the 303 and 306 squadrons, and the 7th Air Wing with F-15Js and F-4EJs in 2 squadrons. Northern Honshu and Hokkaido are defended by 2nd and 3rd Air Wings, flying 2 squadrons of F-15Js and F-2ABs. Each air wing has an air defense regiment consisting of batteries of Patriot PAC-2 missiles. The Ground Self-Defense Force also contributes light forces that are air mobile and amphibious to the defense of the archipelago. The 15th Brigade is stationed in Okinawa and has responsibility for the entire Ryukyu Island chain. It consists of the 51st Light Infantry Regiment, the 15th Aviation Battalion with medium and heavy transport helicopters, and the 6th Air Defense Artillery Battalion, firing Hawk surface-to-air missiles. The Western Army Infantry Regiment is an independent light infantry unit in Kyushu. Because Japan cannot have offensive marine units, the WAIR is part of the Ground Self-Defense Force, but it is based at the major naval port of Sasebo and trains in amphibious as well as air mobile operations. It is a rapidly deployable force that is also tasked with the defense of Japan's far-flung islands. Finally, there is the Central Readiness Force, headquartered near Tokyo. It consists of the 1st Airborne Brigade, the Central Readiness Regiment of Light Infantry, the Special Forces Group of approximately battalion strength, and the 1st Aviation Brigade with medium and heavy transport helicopters. These are the primary forces Japan has to defend itself. The Ground Self-Defense Force also has 1 armored division and 8 mechanized infantry divisions, but these are for the defense of the home islands and unlikely to be engaged or redeployed in a naval war with China. Japan benefits from the advantage of its intimate military alliance with the United States, who acts as ultimate guarantor of territorial integrity, shield against nuclear threat, and who has skin in the game in the form of substantial assets stationed in country. Okinawa is home to the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force, with the 4th Marine Regiment, 12th Artillery Regiment, and the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, a reinforced battalion. The ground troops are backed by the F-18s of the 242 Squadron, 1st Marine Air Wing. Additional regiments belonging to the 3rd MEF are stationed in Hawaii, but could be transported to Okinawa in times of severe crisis. The 5th U.S. Air Force is also part of the U.S. Forces Pacific Command. Based on Okinawa, the 18th Air Wing has 44 and 67 squadrons with F-15s, as well as the E-2B AWACS of the 961 Squadron. Near Tokyo, the 35th Air Wing has the F-16s of 13 and 14 squadrons and more AWACS in the 610 Squadron. The U.S. Air Force also provides ballistic missile defense through the 14th Missile Defense Battery of Patriot PAC-3 launchers in western central Honshu. The U.S. Navy is represented by the 7th Fleet, headquartered at Yokohama. This consists of a carrier battle group centered on the USS George Washington, 2 Ticonderoga-class guided missile cruisers, 7 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, and the USS Blue Ridge command ship. A separate squadron is based at Kure, consisting of the Wasp-class amphibious assault ship, USS Bonhomme Richard, 2 amphibious LSDs, and 4 mine countermeasure vessels. There are also 3 Los Angeles-class nuclear attack submarines in Napa Harbor, Guam, which is not shown. In any hypothetical future naval conflict, China must consider the Ryukyu Islands as a challenging barrier. Under enemy control, the islands make the easy and undetected passage of ships into the Pacific nearly impossible. They also serve as unsinkable bases that threaten key Chinese cities, ports, and sea lanes. Ships and submarines seeking to enter the Pacific could traverse the 125-mile-wide Amami Strait or the 160-mile-wide Miyako Strait. The northern Amami Strait is not only narrower, it is well within range of Japan's main naval and air forces on Kyushu. The wider Miyako Strait is therefore preferred. It is further from the home islands, less well defended, and closer to the most likely target, Taiwan. Nonetheless, the Japanese and American forces based in Okinawa would still be a formidable force for the Chinese to deal with or avoid. Okinawa is probably too well defended for the Chinese to tackle directly with their current amphibious forces. Additionally, there is the possibility that the Chinese may seek to avoid attacking U.S. installations and personnel in an effort to limit a future conflict to Japan alone, or to Japan and Taiwan. The PLA Navy would likely focus on the vulnerable southern Ryukyu islands of Miyako, Ishigaki, and Yonaguni. Seizing them would negate the Japanese barrier and allow the East Sea Fleet a clear path. Air and sea forces based in Okinawa would be deterred from attacking by the rapid deployment of anti-air and anti-ship missiles to the captured islands. Movements of the Japanese Navy, including any attempt to recapture the southern islands, would be challenged by China's 2nd Artillery Corps, which is in charge of all ballistic missiles. The Corps fields at least 2 regiments of DF-21 mobile launchers with sufficient range to cover all of Japan and well beyond. The DF-21 missile is a medium-range ballistic missile known as the Carrier Killer. Carrying a nuclear or large conventional warhead, this missile is purported to be able to detect and identify a carrier-sized target and course-correct the terminal warhead onto the target at hypersonic speed. Its mobility and reloading capability makes it a difficult target to destroy. The southern Ryukyus are also within range of the older short-range DF-15 ballistic missile. The Chinese coast and key installations are protected from U.S. and Japanese aircraft by a sophisticated and multi-layered air defense network, including DWL-002 passive radar systems, reported to have a significant stealth detection capability even against U.S. 5th-generation aircraft, by airborne KJ-2000 AWACS, and batteries of S-300 PMU-2 anti-aircraft missiles with a range of 120 miles. Not even the U.S. Air Force has faced such a challenging threat environment since the end of the Cold War. Alarm has been growing in Japan apace with the increase in Chinese capabilities. The government of Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has increased military spending and recently passed a defense bill through the Diet that comes close to normalizing the status of the Japanese self-defense force. More is needed, however, if Japan wants to present a credible conventional deterrent to Chinese adventurism. Weak points in Japan's defenses need to be strengthened, equipment must be modernized, and sufficient reserve forces established to allow the Japanese to conduct operations even without the support of the United States. Japan could invest in an array of passive hydrophonic sensors along the length of the Ryukyu Islands. Like the highly successful SOSUS network operated by NATO in the North Atlantic, these sensors would make life nasty, brutish, and short for any Chinese submarine attempting to sneak through them undetected. The Miyako and Amami Straits would be the first priority, but the network could eventually be expanded all the way from Yonaguni to Kyushu. In order to deter a swift surprise attack to capture the southern Ryukyus, Japan should provision forward-deployed equipment ready to be mated to an air-transportable light infantry force. Eventually, a light infantry regiment could be permanently based on Miyakojima with responsibility for defending the surrounding islands. To assist them, the Japanese could also place batteries of anti-ship Harpoon or naval strike missiles in mobile launchers at Miyakojima, Okinawa, Tokunoshima, and southern Kyushu. These would be defended by additional batteries of Patriot PAC-3 anti-aircraft missiles on Miyakojima and Tokunoshima. The hundreds of large and small rocky islands that make up the Ryukyu chain make it an ideal hunting ground for smaller ships like corvettes and littoral combat ships. The ships of only a few thousand tons displacement and shallow drafts are capable of hiding from radar detection between rocks and islands where an aircraft carrier cannot go, emerging at high speed to launch a salvo of anti-ship missiles and retreating into cover just as quickly. Japan is in the process of developing an indigenous littoral combat ship design based on the USS Independence class. 4 to 8 of these should be built to provide a less expensive but potent defensive force for the islands. The Japanese Navy should also consider building 2 more Izumo-class helicopter destroyers. The 2 Izumo-class ships currently in commission and the 2 smaller Hyuga-class destroyers provide a critical amphibious capability for the Japanese Navy. But 4 ships do not provide Japan with much margin of security. 1 ship is likely to be in port for refit at any given time, while consideration must be made for another one or two being damaged or lost during combat operations. The addition of 2 more ships would ensure that 4 ships could always be at sea and that 2 escort flotillas, rather than just 1, could continue to operate even if suffering 50% losses in action. Despite being classified as destroyers, these ships are large enough to accommodate the VSTOL-capable F-35B that will slowly equip U.S. Marine forces as of 2016. Japan should make provision to equip each Izumo and Hyuga-class ship with a complement of up to 14 Joint Strike Fighters. I have argued before that the United States should reopen the F-22 production line and increase the number of Raptors in the U.S. Air Force. If that were to occur, Congress should authorize an export version of the air superior fighter with Japan specifically in mind. Japan could then replace the aging F-4EJ and F-2AB fighters with F-22J squadrons while configuring F-15Js into multi-role strike aircraft. Building up a credible defensive deterrent and counter-strike capabilities would require a considerable investment, much greater than Japan has made since the end of the Second World War. The defense budget has remained at a consistent 1% of GDP since at least 1988. The growth of China's economy, as well as their military spending, has caused them to catch up. Chinese military spending exceeded Japan's for the first time in either 2001 or 2005, depending on whether you use the estimates published by the United States Department of Defense or China's official figures. The PLA's budget is now at least 4 times greater than Japan's and growing. While the Japanese do not and cannot enter a military spending competition with China, a higher target of at least 2% of GDP will close the gap and allow the self-defense forces to keep their deterrent value.